Good afternoon, class. My name is Hannah Peacock, and today I will be presenting a review on Jake Thompson's article, Starting with Why, Understanding the Four-Part Gospel. First off, Thompson does a great job of acknowledging the fact that all vocation matters to God. He does state, quote, faith and work content consistently beats the drum of affirming that marketplace vocations are as important to God as professional ministry, end quote. This is good and beneficial to us to know as Christians because it highlights the fact that regardless of what job you're in, regardless of what vocation, we are called to serve God. But the problem is that there's a lot of modern day misconceptions of what it looks like to serve God in the workplace. The first being, I think a lot of people, including myself, assume that Christian vocation and calling only extends to pulpit-related professions. So pastors, preachers, worship leaders, you name it. That's where Christian calling extends to, and that's not true. As Freddie Davis states, God has called every believer into a full-time Christian ministry. No Christian can truly live out a Christian worldview who does not recognize God's calling on his or her life and actively work to accomplish God's purpose through the vocation they work in. So this again highlights that any vocation is a ministry, and regardless of where you are, we're called to serve God. The only problem is that a lot of modern day Christians believe that this seems to only apply to evangelism in the workplace. So regardless of where you're working, your sole purpose should be to evangelize, to speak out to the coworkers, to invite them to church, and to help them find their salvation. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but I'm saying the fact is a lot of us can get disheartened when we work with people that might get turned away from God when they hear that. So the problem, according to Thompson, is that we view our Christian story in a what he refers to as a two-part gospel. So that is understanding the creation and the call to vocation as Christians is one, we are fallen, we are sinful, and thus we're separated from God. And then part two is that Jesus came to earth, sacrificed himself, and therefore made us right with God. This is true, but again, it ultimately detracts from what our vocation should be like as Christians. So Thompson advocates for what he calls the four-part gospel. So part one being that we acknowledge that God made creation and he declared that it was good. And he was happy with it. He was thrilled. Part two, old sin nature came about. Through the fall, we did become sinful human beings. Part three, Jesus came and righted our relationship with God. And in doing that, what we forget is that he invited us to walk alongside him, to serve a ministry with him in whatever we're doing. And then part four, which is probably the most important fact, is that God is using us to actively restore a broken world. The problem with the two-part gospel is it only frames our vocational calling in terms of heaven being the end goal and that we escape to heaven. Whereas this four-part gospel advocates that heaven is ultimately coming to earth, that we will have a new heaven and a new earth and a new creation one day. And it advocates that we offer a glimpse of that new heaven and that new earth here now in our time. So Thompson, when he was working, realized that people weren't necessarily responding to his evangelistic and theological-based principles and actions, but that he was able to actually increase employee efficiency through reframing relationships, through providing a nurturing environment, finding solutions to problems. And it was just by working hard and having a positive work ethic, it contributed to essentially, it reframed the organization's goals. Bethany Jenkins also writes that the four attributes of Christian workers should be fairness and caring, generosity, being calm in times of stress, and providing integrity and authentic work. All of these elements essentially help us, what Thompson refers to as set the world right. But the main ways we can set the world right are, first and foremost, individual salvation and promoting salvation. Like I said, evangelism is not bad. And that's not to say that salvation is important, because it is the most important. But second is that we need to allow our faith to impact every element of our life, relationships, careers, all of that. And then third is we need to make God's presence known through these actions. So in conclusion, this four-part gospel is key to providing the why of marketplace vocations. It's helping us contribute to a fallen world by essentially promoting God's image, by providing a look at what is to come through Christ in the future, And ultimately, as David Benner sums it up in our text, he says that vocation is more than our occupation. It is the face of Christ we are called from eternity to show to the world. Thank you.